How much Bitcoin would it take to retire in the year 2030? In this video, I'm going to show you 5 different valuation models with 5 different price predictions to answer that question. But first, what is the goal? How much money would it actually take to retire in 2030? Well, for the purposes of this little thought experiment, I'm using 1.5 million US dollars as the target. This $1.5 million figure is based off of the average annual cost of living in the US expanded over 30 years and then also adjusted for inflation with an additional 15% contingency in case there's any unforeseen expenses. With that amount of money, somebody could comfortably live in retirement in the US for 30 years without requiring any additional income. And if you live in another, perhaps cheaper country, maybe somewhere warm, you could actually stretch that out a lot further. I'll put a link down below to a spreadsheet where you can see exactly what goes into those numbers, including the sources. But now let's move on to the fun part, which is how much Bitcoin would somebody need to buy now in order to have $1.5 million by 2030? Well, for starters, I feel like I do need to say here at some point that there is a possibility, a percentage chance that Bitcoin actually does go to zero.
Oh, it went to zero!
It is possible, and there are some risks involved with an asset like Bitcoin. However, I know if you've made it this far in the video, you're probably not all that interested in takes like that. So let's move on now to some more bullish price predictions about what Bitcoin could be worth by 2030. And I have 5 different valuation models from leading experts and analysts and hedge fund managers that show 5 different scenarios, which I'm calling the bear case, the base case, the bull case, the super bull case, and then the insane moonshot case, which is presented for how much money Bitcoin could actually be worth in the next 7 years. So let's start with the bear case and then work our way up. And trust me, the last one, the moonshot / insane valuation model, is absolutely ridiculous. But for the bear case, what I'm using is a price prediction from Mike McGlone, who is a senior macro strategist with Bloomberg Intelligence. And you can also follow him on Twitter. I'll throw a link to this down below. Now, he has said several times that Bitcoin should exceed the price of $100,000 per BTC sometime in the next 5 to 7 years. So definitely by 2030. And according to him, this is based off of the supply and demand dynamics of Bitcoin, where demand is increasing over time and the new supply, the new issuance of Bitcoin that's getting mined, is decreasing. And he sees this along with macroeconomic factors culminating in a price per Bitcoin of over $100,000. So if we plug that into our little chart here, remembering that the current price of Bitcoin is around $23,000 and we're targeting $1.5 million by 2030, you can see that in the bear case, if the price per Bitcoin is $100,000, then you would need approximately 15 or 14.95 Bitcoins in 2030 to be able to retire. And if you were going to buy that amount of Bitcoin at today's current price, that would cost around $350,000 US dollars. Now, obviously, $350,000 today is a lot of money, and this is based off of potentially Bitcoin 4xing in price over the next 7 years. Now, this is what I'm calling the bear case scenario, because aside from the possibility that Bitcoin absolutely just nukes and goes to zero, I'm not seeing any real price predictions from real analysts suggesting that the price of Bitcoin is going to be less than this by 2030. But let's move on to the base case, and you'll see as we move up here, the amount of Bitcoin that you might need to retire by 2030 gets steadily lower and lower, and of course the cost that it would actually take to buy that amount of Bitcoin today also decreases proportionally. So the base case valuation model that I'm using for Bitcoin here is based off of a survey of 55 industry experts who provided their price predictions, and this website capital.com took the data in and averaged it out. And according to this survey of 55 experts, which by the way took place last year in October 2022, so after the massive price decline that we've seen over the past year or so, according to this survey, the average of 55 predictions, Bitcoin could be $270,000 by December 2030. So we're using this as the base case here because I think an average of 55 price predictions from industry experts and specialists is a pretty good benchmark on what people think Bitcoin could be worth by 2030. And if that actually comes to pass and one Bitcoin costs around 270,000 US dollars by 2030, then you would only need 5.54 Bitcoin to retire, which at today's prices costs around 130,000 US dollars. Now, in this situation, I feel like we're getting into the realm of what's actually feasible or possible for normal, average, everyday people to actually attain. And you'll see as we move up to the bull, the super bull, and the moonshot case, well, in those cases, obviously, it would be much, much easier to attain the amount of Bitcoin needed to retire. Okay, so let's check out the bull case now. There's two possible valuation models for this one coming from Bloomberg and one coming from ARK Invest, but I'm going to use the Bloomberg one because the ARK Invest one I'm using for the next situation, which is the Super Bowl situation. Bloomberg is a financial services company that specializes in data analysis, and in this report, they lay out what they think are the bull and the bear factors that are pulling the price of Bitcoin one way or another. And according to this report, they see the price of Bitcoin approaching $400,000 by 2030. And they justify this based on the fact that when the Bitcoin halvings have happened in the past, in 2013, 2017, and 2021, there's been a price spike in the price of Bitcoin, and they're taking the average increase in the price of Bitcoin after these halvings and applying it forward to future Bitcoin halvings. And according to this approach, combined with other data that they're incorporating into their model, the price of Bitcoin could exceed 400,000 US dollars. So if we go back to our little spreadsheet over here and plug in that $400,000 figure, you can see that if this valuation model is true, then you would only need 3.74 Bitcoin in 2030 to be able to retire, which at today's prices costs only $86,000. Now, as I was doing the research for this video, I thought that each of these first three scenarios or valuation models were pretty darn bullish if you ask me. But as we move into the next two, this is where it just blows everything out of the water. And if one of these two situations comes true, well then it would take really very little Bitcoin to be financially secure and stable, and even potentially to achieve generational wealth. So let's move now to the Super Bull valuation model. Now this price prediction is coming from a brand new report from ARK Invest. They release this every year, their Big Ideas report, and the Big Ideas 2023 report has an entire section dedicated to Bitcoin, including some very, very bullish price predictions for 2030. So let's check it out. For starters, I want to show you this slide, and specifically this section here in the bottom right corner, where they show that currently, as of the time of this report, crypto assets, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all other cryptocurrencies, are valued at a market cap of around $1 trillion. And they see the total value of that market exceeding $20 trillion by 2030, with an additional $5 trillion for the value of smart contracts, which I would say excludes Bitcoin. And when it comes to Bitcoin specifically, as you can see in this graph here, ARK Invest's bull case for the price of Bitcoin by 2030 is $1.4 million per Bitcoin. And this is based off of a breakdown of 50% market share of digital gold, which is the purple section, 6.5% market share of institutional investment, so that's large ETFs and pension funds and hedge funds and big firms that come in and buy up Bitcoin to hold on their books. Those are the two biggest ones, and I'm not going to break down each of the different market opportunities here, but suffice to say that the bullish price target from ARK Invest for 2030 is $1.5 million per Bitcoin. So if we go back over here to our spreadsheet and plug that into the Super Bull column, you can see that if Bitcoin is actually worth $1.5 million per coin by 2030, which is coincidentally our target, then we would need 1 Bitcoin by 2030 to actually be able to retire, which at today's prices costs around $23,000. So yes, while this might seem like a really out there pie in the sky type of valuation model, if it does come true, if it comes to pass, then it would only take actually 1 Bitcoin to be able to retire by 2030. Now let's talk about the final valuation model that I've found here, and this one is absolutely insane. I'm not sure if I put too much stock in this, but the guy who actually made this price prediction, Robert Breedlove, is the CEO of Parallax Capital hedge fund, so he's not actually just a nobody that's posting on Twitter, but as you will see, his price prediction is over 10 times more bullish than even ARK Invest's price prediction, which I already thought was ridiculously bullish. But according to Robert Breedlove, the CEO of the crypto investment firm Parallax Digital, he believes that the price of Bitcoin will exceed $12.5 million by 2031. And he's given a number of different interviews over the past year where he's confirmed that this isn't a typo and he actually believes that. And he's basing this price prediction on the fact that on top of all the Bitcoin halvings and the increase in demand for the asset, and also the decrease in supply that's occurring over time, that he's also suggesting there's going to be a total debasement of the US dollar. And of course, if that were to happen, then in US dollar terms, one Bitcoin would become exponentially more valuable if the US dollar is becoming less and less valuable. So this final moonshot slash insane valuation model definitely takes a couple of leaps and you have to jump through a few mental hoops to get there. But if you do believe that the US dollar is destined to fail sometime in the next decade and that Bitcoin will become the world reserve currency, then yes, it is technically possible, I suppose, that Bitcoin could be worth 12.5 million US dollars by 2030. And if that situation actually came to pass, you would only need 0.12 Bitcoin to retire, which at today's prices would cost you $2,778. So there you have it. 5 different price predictions for what Bitcoin could be worth by 2030 and how much Bitcoin you might actually need to be able to retire off of that. But what happens after you retire? Let's talk about that. So when it comes to the possibility of actually retiring off of Bitcoin by 2030, there's a few final things that I want to say. First of all, I am absolutely not suggesting that anybody should put all of their retirement eggs in the Bitcoin basket and just YOLO put all of their cash in. I think that would be incredibly risky and incredibly ill-advised. Of course, a lot of retirement advisors are actually suggesting that people now allocate at least a small percentage of their portfolios towards assets like cryptocurrency, but definitely would never YOLO everything into Bitcoin trying to retire early. Secondly, I think it's important to say that after retirement, people should probably rotate out of risk-on assets like Bitcoin and buy into fixed income, dividend paying stocks or bonds, or at least broad market ETFs to really reduce the risk of price fluctuations, because once you're actually in retirement, what you want is stability, not rapid price increases. That way, if any of the 5 Bitcoin price predictions that I just discussed actually came to pass, somebody might be able to actually leverage a Bitcoin investment to move into retirement, but then transition that money over to something much safer, much more secure and reliable over the long term, and make sure that their 30 years plus in retirement goes smoothly, because holding on to Bitcoin can, as we all know, be a wild ride. And the final thing that I want to say about investing in Bitcoin for retirement or for any purpose really is that when it comes to the security of your investment, I 100% recommend to not leave your money on a crypto exchange. We've all seen what happened to FTX and BlockFi and a number of other crypto institutions over the past 12 months. And if anything, this should have taught everybody that when you're buying Bitcoin, you should maybe buy it on an exchange and then immediately remove it to a hardware cold storage wallet where you are the sole custodian of your Bitcoin assets. And if everything goes well and one of these valuation models, even really just the bear case, let alone the super moonshot insane case comes to pass, then it might actually be possible to leverage a Bitcoin investment into sitting on a beach somewhere cheap and somewhere warm and enjoying retirement. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one.